The manuscript came into my hands on an autumn afternoon, a plain brown envelope with no return address, left on my doorstep like a silent omen. Inside, only yellowed sheets and a note. "I found this in the Vatican archives. You need to see it. They're looking for me now." There was no signature, just the initials MS scrawled in ink at the bottom corner. What followed once I opened those pages altered my understanding of reality in ways I could never have predicted. It all began when Professor Alexander Ross, a renowned paleographer at Bologna University, was granted exceptional permission to study medieval documents preserved in the Vatican secret archives. A rare authorization earned after decades of meticulous work and an unshakable reputation in European academic circles. What should have been just another inquiry into 14th century manuscripts turned into a nightmare that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Amid scrolls detailing routine ecclesiastical transactions, Ross discovered a distinct codex catalogued simply as Revelatio 1318, written in vulgar Latin with agitated, almost feverish handwriting. The document recounted the experiences of a Benedictine monk named Guy of Arezzo, not the famous music theorist, but an obscure namesake who served as a scribe in a monastery high in the Apennine Mountains. "I witnessed the luminous being's visitation for the third time tonight," Guy's account began. "It is neither angel nor demon, but something beyond the comprehension of our scriptures. It speaks without moving its lips, moves without stirring the air. Its eyes, three concentric circles of intense white light, observe not only our bodies, but our very essence. It knows our thoughts before we think them." The monk went on to detail nocturnal encounters with an entity he called a visitor from distant stars. The visitations began after a night when a bright object streaked across the sky and appeared to land in the forests near the monastery. At first, Guy believed he was experiencing divine visions, but as the encounters intensified, he began to question the celestial nature of his visitor. "It showed me images of the future, unfathomable instruments and sky-piercing structures. It spoke of a grand design, how our world is but a grain of sand on an endless shore. Creation, it told me, is vaster and older than our sacred texts can grasp. They have watched from the beginning, guiding us like discreet shepherds." Professor Ross noticed something peculiar in the manuscript. Among the pages were detailed sketches by the monk, depictions of the entity and the symbols it revealed. One illustration in particular caught his eye. It was virtually identical to a modern satellite photograph of Earth from space, an impossibility in the 14th century. Another sketch showed intertwined helical structures any modern biologist would recognize as DNA. One passage sent chills down Ross's spine. The being spoke of a man who would come centuries later, marked with Christ's stigmata. "They will call him pious, and his body will bear the marks not as punishment, but as channels of communication. Through his blood, messages will be transmitted." Father Pius, the 20th century Italian mystic who bore the stigmata for 50 years, was, according to Guy's writings, not merely a modern saint, but part of something far older and more unfathomable. The document hinted at a link between the stigmata and what it called encoded signs, a form of biological information transmission between different realities. Ross was particularly disturbed when he found descriptions in the manuscript that matched confidential medical records of Father Pius, records he could not have known, microscopic details of the wounds, anomalous blood composition, and inexplicable temperature readings around the stigmata. One drawing showed patterns within the wounds that, when overlaid, formed a precise star map. Days after his discovery, Professor Ross began noticing men in black suits watching him from a distance, both on campus and near his home. Silent, Phone calls interrupted his sleep at 3:18 a.m., a direct reference to the document's title, Revelatio 13:18. Colleagues noticed his growing paranoia, nervousness during lectures, dark circles under his eyes from sleepless nights. Desperate for answers, Ross reached out to an old study partner, Father Mark Salvin, a respected theologian with privileged access to Vatican inner circles. They met in a tiny cafe in Trastevere, far from prying eyes. "Alexander, what you've uncovered shouldn't have been seen," Salvin whispered. "There are documents the Church keeps not to hide truth from the world, but to protect the world from truth. Guy's manuscript is only the tip of a much deeper, older iceberg." Father Salvin revealed the existence of an unofficial Vatican department known only as the Guardians of Truth. Established secretly in the 8th century during the papacy of Adrian II. Its mission: to catalogue and investigate inexplicable phenomena that challenge both Christian doctrine and later scientific understanding. Father Pius's stigmata weren't mere mystical manifestations, Salvin continued. Secret analyses of his blood samples revealed molecular anomalies that defy current science. Unknown protein structures, impossible cellular configurations. Some Vatican scientists theorized the wounds functioned as biological interfaces. Salvin's account corroborated disturbing aspects of Guy's manuscript. During his mystical ecstasies, Pius often murmured in unknown languages, not ancient tongues but phonetic structures Vatican linguists swear defy human speech patterns. On some nights, witnesses saw inexplicable lights emanating from his stigmata. For those following these revelations with an open heart and a restless mind, know this is just one of many mysteries we will continue to uncover. Stay with us on this journey through humanity's hidden secrets and subscribe to this channel so you don't miss any future disclosures. Ross's obsession deepened. He traced connections between the medieval manuscript and other unexplained events throughout history. He discovered that in 1968, the year of Father Pius's death, an unaccountable electromagnetic anomaly was recorded by military satellites directly over St. John Rotondo, the town where the saint lived. The phenomenon lasted exactly 33 minutes, the number of Christ's earthly years, and was never officially explained. As his investigation deepened, Ross found references to other historical figures who, like Father Pius, served as vessels. St. Catherine of Siena, whose incorrupt body still lies in Rome, also bore stigmata and, according to rarely cited documents, produced automatic writings in unknown languages during her ecstasies. St. Francis of Assisi, the first documented stigmatic, kept personal notes of luminous visitors before his wounds appeared. A pattern emerged. Every major stigmatic in history had experienced encounters with luminous beings before the wounds manifested. All reported transmissions of knowledge beyond their time and training, and all were eventually silenced, controlled, or isolated by the Church. Ross gained access to a rarely mentioned audio file, a secret recording of one of Father Pius's confessions, captured by a hidden device at the Vatican during his investigation. In the partly corrupted tape, Pius whispered, "They are not what we think, neither angels nor demons. They come from very far. They use our religious symbols to convey truths we cannot comprehend directly. The wounds are gateways, not punishments." One stormy night, Ross received an unexpected visitor. An elderly man, drenched by rain, claimed to have been an assistant to Dr. Joseph Saul, the physician who examined Father Pius in the 1950s. He carried a small sealed vial, allegedly containing a preserved blood sample from one of the stigmata. Dr. Saul never turned over all the samples to the Vatican, the visitor said. He knew there was something extraordinary there. Before he died, he asked me to safeguard this until I found someone truly seeking truth. That person is you. Ross sneaked into a friend's university lab at night. What the preliminary analysis revealed defied any conventional explanation. The blood, despite decades of storage, remained fluid, without clotting or decay. Under an electron microscope, it displayed unknown structures resembling organic nanocircuits, integrated into the cells. Even more unsettling, when exposed to certain electromagnetic wavelengths, the blood emitted luminous patterns forming complex mathematical sequences. From that point on, Ross's situation deteriorated rapidly. His apartment was ransacked, computers and notes vanished. The blood sample disappeared from the lab, along with all analysis records. His friend, the lab technician, vehemently denied any tests were performed. Security cameras that night recorded inexplicable technical glitches. Father Salvin ceased all communication. When Ross went to the Vatican seeking him, he was told the theologian had departed on an indefinite research mission to a remote monastery whose location they would not disclose. It was then that Ross realized he was being followed by two kinds of watchers: men in black suits, discreet yet omnipresent, and subtler observers, ordinary in appearance but with eyes that bore an inhuman intensity. In certain light, those eyes reflected concentric circular patterns. In his mounting desperation, Ross sought help from an unlikely source, a clandestine circle of anomaly experts meeting in a bookstore basement in Trastevere. Among them was Dr. Helen Moretto, an astrophysicist who had quit a promising career at the European Space Agency after a mysterious desert expedition in Chile. "What you describe is not new," Moretto told him. The patterns in Father Pius's stigmata correspond to specific sky coordinates, not of current constellations, but how certain stars were arranged about 14,000 years ago. And that configuration points exactly to a star system from which we received anomalous signals in 1968, the year Pius died. Moretto shared her own research, a mathematical correlation between the appearance of certain religious phenomena throughout human history and specific astronomical events. The stigmata were not simple religious manifestations, but part of a complex, ancient communication pattern. "Human religions are like simplified interfaces," she explained. "Basic operating systems designed so primitive minds can process concepts far beyond their natural capacity. Miracles, manifestations, mystical ecstasies, they are moments of direct transmission when the interface is temporarily lifted." Ross finally grasped the true meaning of Guy's manuscript. The celestial visitors had never left. They had been present throughout human history, manifesting through our religious and mythic structures, adapting to our cultural and technological evolution. But why the stigmata? Why use physical suffering as a communication channel? Ross asked. "Pain transcends linguistic and cultural barriers," Moretto replied. "It's a direct biochemical conduit to the brain, altering states of consciousness. In predictable ways, the wounds are literally doors in the barrier between dimensions." In the last desperate attempt to document his findings before they could be completely suppressed, Ross compiled his notes, copies of the medieval manuscript, and the preliminary blood analyses into a single dossier. He sent copies to trusted colleagues, with instructions to release them if anything happened to him. 3 days later, Professor Alexander Ross vanished without a trace. His apartment was found spotless, with no signs of struggle or hurried departure. The university received a formal resignation letter, impeccably drafted in his style, citing health issues and the need for an extended sabbatical. When Dr. Moretto tried to investigate his disappearance, every door was slammed shut. Authorities denied any irregularity. University peers seemed oddly disinterested. It was as if a fog of forgetfulness had settled over Ross's very existence. Moretto eventually obtained confidential medical files on Father Pius, held by the Vatican. What she found confirmed her worst suspicions. Spectrographic analyses of the scar tissue from the stigmata revealed isotopic compositions impossible for terrestrial materials. Microscopic examinations showed modified cellular structures that acted like biological antennas, capable of receiving and transmitting signals on frequencies unused by human technology. More disturbing still, limited genetic tests secretly conducted in 1999 during Pius's beatification process indicated DNA segments that did not match any known human genetic patterns. These anomalies were concentrated specifically in the stigmata tissues. In his last known journal entries, found in a coded diary discovered after his disappearance, Ross wrote, "Truth is more terrible and marvelous than we ever imagined. We are not alone, never have been. But our cosmic companions are not mere visitors from other planets. They are multidimensional beings for whom time and space work fundamentally differently. Our religions are primitive attempts to understand them. Our prophets and mystics, their communication channels. Father Pius was not just a saint, he was a biological transmission station. His 50 years of stigmata coincided exactly with a specific astronomical cycle tied to the visitor's home system. His constant suffering was not divine punishment, but the inevitable cost of keeping a dimensional gateway open in a human body not designed for such function. What terrifies me most is not their presence, but the possibility they might leave. Evidence suggests cycles of engagement and withdrawal throughout human history, periods of intense, miraculous activity followed by centuries of relative silence. If the pattern holds, we are reaching the end of an activity cycle that began around Father Pius's birth. Humanity is like a child periodically abandoned by its parents, left to grow on its own for decades, receiving only occasional visits and cryptic clues about its true nature and purpose. We will never know if this is cosmic cruelty or evolutionary necessity. Every religion, every myth, every spiritual system contains fragments of the truth distorted by our perceptual limits. Father Pius's stigmata, the Fatima visions, Guy's 14th century accounts, they are all pieces of the same infinite puzzle. I feel I'm on the verge of a final revelation that will unify all these fragments. But I also feel I am not alone in my apartment tonight. Shadows move when I'm not. Looking, whispers linger at the edge of hearing. And outside the window, lights traverse the sky in patterns neither natural nor technological. If anyone finds these notes, continue the search. Truth is not only about extraterrestrial visitors or paranormal phenomena, it's about the nature of consciousness, reality itself, and our place in the cosmos. Father Pius knew this. In his final days, when asked about his stigmata, he replied cryptically, "The wounds are doors, and doors work both ways." What crosses these doors? Where do they truly lead? This was the last known entry in the diary. The following pages had been torn out. As for Dr. Moretto, she too disappeared 6 months later after claiming to have established contact with one of the entities using a method inspired by the electromagnetic frequencies emitted by Father Pius's stigmata. Her apartment was found covered in strange symbols, the very ones described in Guy of Arezzo's manuscript 700 years earlier. One final, unsettling detail: the brown envelope containing the manuscript and Ross's notes, delivered to my door that autumn afternoon, had a small, empty vial attached. Under analysis, the glass bore microscopic traces of blood, fluid that, upon examination, revealed impossible cellular structures and self-luminescent properties at certain frequencies. Since learning of these events, I've observed strange patterns around me, inexplicable lights in the night sky, people whose eyes, under certain lighting, reflect concentric circles, and, most disturbing of all, small wounds that occasionally appear on my hands and feet, exuding not ordinary blood, but a crimson fluid that seems to pulse with its own light. Are we truly alone in the universe, or part of a cosmic experiment far beyond our understanding? Were Father Pius's stigmata divine manifestations, or advanced biological technology disguised as religious phenomena? And if those dimensional doors were opened, what exactly passed through them, both ways? If you are reading this, it is probably too late for me, but perhaps not too late for the truth. Watch the skies, notice the coincidences, and if you ever feel a sharp, inexplicable pain in your hands or feet, remember, once opened, some doors never fully close. Can you see the patterns around you now? Are you really alone as you read these words?